he gets a lot of chance to address the beetle issue and other things that come up with forest. And so I'm really looking forward to what he's got to say, and hopefully he'll tell me how to fix some of my trees that I have to cut them down and peel them. That's the only thing I know how to do.
Thank you. I don't know if I've worked with any of you before. I've worked a pretty large area. I go from Drummond to the Idaho border, so I go all in Mineral County and so forth. So I have been dealing with bark beetles for a long time. And what we're talking about here mostly, almost primarily, is the mountain pine beetle. That's the one that's getting into the pine trees. Lodgepole pine, ponderosa pine, scotch pine if you have some ornamentals, and makes those little pitch blobs on the sides. And then the tree dies, and then you see red trees and you think they're all going to die. So I'm going to get into this.
Oh, this is the last one. Sorry.
Oops. Okay. The mountain pine beetle is listed at the top, but that's not the only bark beetle around. There's Douglas fir beetle, pine engraver beetle, fir engraver beetle, spruce beetle, red turpentine beetle, western pine beetle, and western balsam bark beetle. So there's different beetles for different species, and some beetles will hit several species. Douglas fir beetle doesn't go into the pine. The pine beetles don't go into the Douglas fir, but the pine beetles will hit all of the pines. Okay.
Up to the other button on the other side.
What is it backwards
Yeah, use your index. There you go.
here? Okay. Here we go again. It's ponderosa pine, lodgepole pine, limber pine, white bark pine. You might have heard about how the white bark pine lives way, way high in the mountains, is dying off because of the bark beetles. Well, it's high enough that the beetles have never really been up there in any numbers before. But for global warming or whatever, they're living and going up higher and surviving and staying up higher, and so the white bark pine happens to be really susceptible. Some trees seem to be a lot more susceptible to the bark beetle than others. Lodgepole pine around here is more susceptible than ponderosa pine, but when the populations get high, really all bets are off. So, and if you have any questions as I go through this, just put your hand up and pay attention. Okay, the pine beetles, they've always been here. They've been here for, who knows, a million years maybe. So they are native, but their populations go up and down. I was talking with an old forester who had worked on the Bitterroot many years ago, and he was talking about 1926, the Bitterroot getting hit so hard. And there's dead trees laying around, and some have burned up, some haven't, but you can still see that. And if you're ever walking in the forest and you notice a group of trees that are just falling down inside an otherwise healthy looking forest, you just see the trees falling down. It's probably a patch of pines that were killed with bark beetles. And they do tend to hit in patches, in groups. You'll see a red patch on a hillside, and it'll be just green otherwise. You'll see another patch acres away and so forth. And they tend to hit, I think they go into a brood tree and then they hit the trees immediately around it, but the patch doesn't just keep extending and extending. All the time I'm going around a patch of trees that have been hit, and I'm not finding where they moved into the next trees. They just leave and they go acres away, probably your neighbor's probably, and hit that. So that's the way they operate. When their numbers get high, again, all bets are off. And in lodgepole, they just keep spreading and spreading and spreading until they're just about all dead. In the ponderosa pine, they hit these groups, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, because having a hole in the forest is good. And from a fire standpoint, it comes along and the fire gets to the ground and you got a gap in the forest and adds nutrients to the soil and allows young trees to grow. So it allows a little more diversity in the forest that way by hitting a patch at a time, as long as it does that. In Helena, I think it's just hitting all trees, all sizes, all ages. And also, they don't seem to hit the older trees quite so much. They can, and they do. But the big old trees are less likely to be mass attacked enough to kill it.
Are there any birds that go after these?
All woodpeckers go after them. Sometimes you'll see the bark on the trees where they pick the bark off, and that just made little holes. They rip the bark off. And sometimes you'll see that the tree's green and they're doing that. Well, I'll get into that in a minute, but the tree's dead, but it hasn't turned green, or turned red yet. So, because the tree's dormant all winter long, and when it tries to grow in the spring, usually they get hit one summer, and then they're dormant. They stay green all winter long, and then when the tree tries to grow in the springtime, it just sucks itself dry. It's really been dead, but until it tries to grow and transpire, it doesn't really suck the moisture out of those needles, and then it turns red. So 1 year it's hit, the next year it turns red. And just about the time that the tree is red is the time that the beetles got to the point where the new beetles are flying off to other trees. So if you're running around chasing red trees and taking them down, you're a little bit late. You might get some, but a lot of them are left off. The life cycle of the beetles, what happens is the parent will fly into a tree, bore into the bark, and where they're at is in that cambium, that juicy layer between the bark and the wood. That's where they spend their whole life. And the parent will bore in there and then bore a vertical tunnel. And this happens anywhere from last week in June up until, I've seen them fly in September if it continues to be warm. So the parent will dig a tunnel and bore a vertical tunnel and lay eggs on each side. They'll lay about 60, 75 eggs or so on each side. When those eggs hatch, it goes into the larval stage. And those larvae are like little maggots. And they start going perpendicular to the parent's tunnel. And the vertical tunnel really isn't what kills the tree so much. It's vertical wounds on a tree isn't so damaging. It's the ones that go around and girdle the tree. So then the larvae will hatch and they start doing their own thing. They bore tunnels perpendicular around the tree, and that does more damage than anything. And they'll go 3 or 4 inches or so, and then they'll pupate. Well, they spend the winter in either the larval form or the pupal form, somewhere in there. They all seem to be maturing at different times. They all have different speeds. So there's a lot of beetles doing their thing individually within a tree, and they mature at different rates. So they'll spend the winter in the larval stage or the pupal stage. And then there's the pupa, the third one from the left. This kind of looks like a half a beetle. And they'll be in the pupal stage about 2 weeks or so. And then, so they go from a larva to a full-blown beetle. And then, and that's happening early on. It's happening maybe even now in some trees. So come July 1st or so, then the mature beetle will come out and fly around. And they can fly for miles. So it's tough dealing with bark beetles because you might get every beetle off your property, just be totally successful in getting them off your property, and they can fly in for miles. So it can be very discouraging. So, and then the adult stage. And this just shows the cycle of the year. So you can see they're not adults for all that long. They just fly and do their thing and then they die. And they're in the larval stage most of the time. That's when they're doing a lot of the damage and spending the winter that way too. They have a chemical that they put out that keeps them from freezing. And but they can freeze. That's one of the things that kills them. But it has to be like 20, 30, 40 below with wind for a week or so. So And wind helps because it just kind of makes the cold go deeper into the tree. So that's probably one of the major population controls is cold, but it just doesn't seem to happen so much anymore. And this is the sort of thing that you're looking for when you're trying to find a tree that's hit. These are the pitch tubes. The tree's natural defense is to just pitch the beetle out. The beetle bores in there, and if it's a healthy tree with lots of pitch, the pitch just oozes out and forces the beetle out or traps the beetle. And so you might see one of those. And if it's real milky color without the red in it, that's a good sign. It means that the beetle hasn't been boring around in there and producing a lot of boring dust. It's just clean pitch. So that's a good sign. So if you have a tree that's just has a couple of hits on it and they're real milky, there doesn't seem to be any boring dust mixed in, and you're not seeing this boring dust on the ground at the base, that's a real sign that it's a goner. Don't even try to save a tree if it has that boring dust there. If the tree is rather unhealthy, if it's in drought, stress, or something like that, and it's not producing a lot of pitch, sometimes you just don't see that many pitch tubes on it. You can see how many pitch tubes are on this one. Sometimes you won't see that many pitch tubes on it, but if you see that boring dust, it doesn't matter how many pitch tubes it has. The beetles are going to town in there, and that tree is dead. And you'll look at it and it looks perfectly green and healthy. Might be the healthiest tree around because they're looking for a nice, relatively thick phloem to make a brood in. So you just wonder, is that tree going to die? And if you're seeing boring dust, not just on the ground, but on the tree as well, on the bark, on the crevices and so forth, that tree's a goner.
So if you have just white pitch tubes, no red stuff, no boring dust,
yes.
leave the tree be?
Well, if it's just a few hits, I would. At least I'd watch it, at least. But it may very well make it. It looks like a real healthy tree, so I wouldn't take a tree down with just a couple of hits on it. I'd look for boring dust, too. So, okay. This is the galleries, the tunnels that they have. You can see how the parent goes in and makes a vertical tunnel, laid eggs on each side. All these white specks are larvae. And then the larvae start doing their thing, and you can just see how much damage they do underneath the bark. And then the bark starts sloughing off. I'm sure you've seen that, and it falls off, and you can just see all the galleries in there. These are pupal chambers there. That's where it's going to turn into a beetle and fly off. So, another thing that kills the tree is fungus that they carry in. On the mature beetle, when they bore in there, they actually carry a fungus with them. It's just on their body, and it goes in, and it gets translocated through the tree. It goes all up and down the sapwood, goes out into the branches and everything, and it plugs up all the tubes that is the tree. And so sometimes you don't have that many hits, but if there's enough of the blue stain that gets, that's what it's called, blue stain, that fungus gets in there, that can plug and kill the tree. And it helps the beetle in several ways. First of all, it makes the tree so it can't fight back very well. It just kind of helps the beetle do the tree in. And also the larvae will eat that. When they're doing their boring, they eat that fungus. So it's kind of a good deal for the beetle, bad deal for the tree. So, and the fungus itself can kill the tree outright as well. This just goes into, I think there's a few slides here that just shows how extensive this is at this point in time. And like I said, there's been beetle epidemics before. They go up and they go down. And in a pine forest, they're never gone. There's always a patch that gets here and a patch that gets hit there in a pine forest. So they're just always around, they're just part of the pine forest. But you can see they're hitting a lot of acres, and lodgepole pine in particular. Lodgepole pine is a tree, it just doesn't live very long. Its strategy is to just reproduce like crazy and grow, and they're weak and they fall over and they get hit by beetles and they burn up, and they thrive because they just keep sending out seeds and keep on growing and stuff. And by five needle pine, that's like white bark pine and limber pine and things like that. Scotch pine is another one. This shows the areas with infestations right now. You can see the Butte, Anaconda, and Helena area is just getting hammered. It's amazing. I would imagine the population's probably going down around the mountains around Butte now because there's no host left alive. This just shows they have the state and the Forest Service does an aerial detection survey every year, and they monitor the ups and downs of the, not just bark beetles, but all insects and diseases around the state. And I think this just shows the distribution of the forests in the state that shows where it's most susceptible. And you can see that where the red and the high is the Butte and Anaconda area, and that's where they are too. This area really is less susceptible than those areas because those are just have so much lodgepole mixed in the higher elevations, and they don't nearly have the fir and the larch that we have around here. We have having a mix of species is a big deal in keeping a healthy forest. You want it to be as diverse as you possibly can. The biggest mix of species, the better. Then if you get spruce budworm in the fir, you still have the pine and the larch. If you get bark beetles in the pine, you still have the larch and the fir and so forth. So we're better off here. We just have a nice mix. So if every pine were to die, it'd be sad, but there'd still be a lot of trees. Okay, now this just covers some of the options that you have for dealing with these beetles and trying to save your trees. One is silvicultural, and we'll get into that. Pheromones, which I'm sure you've heard, is these packets that you can put on the trees. The beetles communicate with pheromones. When they bore into a tree, if they find a tree and they're being successful, they send out a pheromone. I don't know if it's just a happy pheromone or what. They let all the others know that that's a tree, there's a happy beetle in there, so they start hitting it. And then after a while, there's so many beetles in there, they send out, the pheromone changes because they start to run into another and so forth, and I think they're not so happy anymore. So they send out a different pheromone, and that's detected, and so they don't bother in this tree where they're running into each other. They go to other trees. And that's the whole idea of these, the verbenone is what that particular pheromone is for the mountain pine beetle. Verbenone is a pheromone, the odor that the beetles send out when they're in a tree and it's full and they're saying, go somewhere else. So. And then there's sprays that can be done as well. And when we're talking spraying, we're not talking nice little mist from above. We're talking hosing the thing down completely so it's saturating the bark and running off in streams. So. And I've got some pictures of that. The strategy, basically, and silviculturally, when you treat your forest, is to make it as healthy as you can, thin it out, take out the crummy trees that are crowding the good healthy trees. And by good healthy trees, I mean ones with a good full crown, not these skinny little whips that haven't had any sun, lost all their branches and so forth, but the nice full trees. If you give those space to grow, they'll have a fighting chance against the beetles. And also, the beetles really don't like it when there's direct sunlight on the bark gets really hot. They don't like that so much. So that by opening up the stand, it'll do that as well. And the pheromones that they send out get dissipated when the wind moves through the the stand. So if you open up the stand enough so breeze can go through freely, then that pheromone gets dissipated and it just isn't as effective. So that's the strategy behind treating the forest to make it healthy. And within your forest, like I said, you want it to be as diverse as possible. So if you're mostly pines, favor every fir you can that isn't just a real runt. And larch as well. And larch, if you're trying to help larch, it really doesn't do well in the shade. So if you're going to leave a larch, don't leave a little larch down in the shade because it just won't do anything. You're going to have to give it some room to grow. You're going to have to give it some sunlight. And if you're ever doing anything thinning and you want to help a particular tree, the direction to consider is south, because the sun goes across the horizon to the south. So by taking a tree out to help this tree on this side, it will help it. But if you take a tree out on this side, it's not going to help it because the sun's coming from this way. So it's just something to consider. And then, of course, removing any bug hit trees that you see, dead trees as well. Well, once a tree's dead and red, it's kind of an eyesore and a fire hazard, but it's not so much a threat anymore from bark beetles. They've already left. And especially a tree that's been red for hit one year, red the next year some of the needles have fallen off. You could just take that for firewood. I wouldn't cut down a tree that's green, and it's got beetles in it, and cut it for firewood because the beetles don't care if the tree's upright or horizontal. They're just going to fly anyway. So.
What's the tarping?
Tarping is
I'm sorry,
tarping is where you take clear plastic and you take your trees, cut them down, limb them, and then you put a couple on the ground, a couple of logs on the ground to get it off the ground so it dries. And then lay a row like that and a row like that, cover it all with plastic and hold it down with rocks or other logs or something, and in the hopes that it will get hot enough to kill the beetles. In Montana, that doesn't work so well. So.
What about throwing a bug bomb in there?
Well, that might work. that definitely might work. I don't know from personally speaking, but I don't see how that couldn't work actually. So, I mean, if you had like half an acre of trees, you couldn't deal with it that way anyway. But it's just a couple of trees that you can manhandle into a pile. That might just work. And this goes into the pheromones, how the beetles communicate. They attract some with some pheromones and they dissipate with others. And you can see that the tree's fading there. Before it goes fully red, it'll start to lose its color. And sometimes every tree's different because it was hit at a different time and it's growing at a different rate and so forth. But some trees might change a little early, and you might get to it in time. If it starts that faded color, hasn't turned fully red, and it's early in summer, I would put the effort into getting that off the property because there's probably still some beetles in there. Some may have flown, others are going to come out a little later, so it's worth dealing with. Bird owns those packs. And they're pretty expensive actually. They're like, I don't know, $12 to $15 a piece. And if you have a large, beautiful ponderosa in your front yard, that's the most important tree in your property, I'd probably put 2 on that. And otherwise, you can either put 1 per tree or 2 per tree, or you could spread them out. If you have like an acre or half an acre, you can put them on trees in a grid pattern through your stand of trees, and so the odor just dissipates through the thing. And you just staple them up over your head. And they say you should put them on the north side of the tree because I think the reason that is so that the direct sun doesn't get to it, because they only last one season. And they want you to put it up as late as possible before the beetle flight, so we'll be sure to still have some potency by the end of the beetle flight. So you want to put those up around last week in June. And if it's a real cold spring, you can get away with it a little later. If it's a really warm spring, maybe you jump it forward a week. So if you're doing it in a grid pattern, about every 35 feet apart, and they don't even need to be on ponderosa pine. They could be on a fir or a larch or a house or a fence post, as long as you cover the whole area in a grid pattern. So yeah, 22 to 40 an acre. That comes out somewhere to like 30 to 40 feet between the caps.
What is the cost of that?
They're about $12 to $15 a piece. So anything cheap, unfortunately.
Where can you get that?
I've got that here.
So you can't buy them at like Ace or?
Yes, you can. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You can buy it in the hardware stores, and there's a couple of distributors, I think, if you want to write down their phone numbers. I've got that too. So one thing is the verbenome just works on mountain pine beetle. It doesn't work on the other types of beetles. And there are other types of beetles that hit pine. One is the western pine beetle. And if you take the bark off a tree that's hit, it's pretty easy to tell. The galleries are very distinctive in the mountain pine beetle. It's one we've been talking about. In the western pine beetle, they're just kind of going all over the place. It doesn't really make any sense. So it's a very different gallery pattern. And the western pine beetle generally hits older trees. So
Does it fall on roads?
no, it doesn't. That's a good question. No, it really doesn't. It can, but you don't see a lot of pitch tubes.
Does the western beetle hit lodgepole?
I don't think it does. I've never seen it. Yeah, it's like a old growth ponderosa pine beetle, really. When you're considering whether a verbenome is going to work in your stand, one thing you want to consider is how hard hit is it. It's just like a few trees left, and it's just like covered in beetles from last year. Especially if you 40% of your stand has green hit trees, meaning all those trees were hit last summer. It probably isn't going to work. But when you do use the verbenome, you really need to get those brood trees off the property. And it's harder to sell them these days, unfortunately. It's kind of a perfect storm. More trees are dying and there's fewer places to sell them. But I think if there's not too big, you can take them to eco compost. They can grind up to a certain diameter. I've given them a call and see how much they can take and what you can bring in. Because chipping the beetle is probably the best thing. You can also just build a fire and feed it and burn them. And even if it doesn't consume the whole bowl of the tree, it will kill the beetles. Johnson Brothers is another place that can take them. That's a place on the interstate towards the airport where you see the piles of pallets below the interstate as you're going by. They collect stuff there and they bring chippers in, they chip it periodically. And I think they let you dump trees there. So the mills really don't want to take them. Smurfit Stone used to take them by the thousands, but now there's just sawmills left, and they really don't want them because they really don't want the blue stain. They particularly don't want the blue stain in ponderosa pine. It's just nothing they can use. So burning or chipping or peeling the bark and then burning the bark. Actually, if you just were to peel the bark, it'd probably be good enough. So especially if you were to do it during the winter. So.
What about biofuels and that, are they using it for stuff like that?
Using it for?
Biofuel?
Not yet. A lot of people are doing a lot of thinking, trying to come up with a whole lot of money. I believe it will happen eventually, but it isn't at this point in time. So. That's a good question. That would really be the answer. These are the distributors. You want to write these down. The retailers, you can buy them at Cenex is a good place to get them. I think Ace Hardware has them. And I think the other hardware stores do as well. Give them a call first. But these are the places that actually make and sell it. So if you want that number, just go ahead and write that down.
Does it make any difference if you buy bulk? I mean, if you got 60 or 80 or 100 acres, or maybe if a whole lot of people with small acreage got together and bought a lot, does the price come down at all?
Yeah, I've called the companies and they said yes, it does come down, but the price they quoted me was disappointing anyway. But it did come down, and I think not just any person can't buy a whole bunch and distribute them because it's a controlled chemical. So you kind of need you can buy it yourself from the distributor or the retailer, but I don't think legally you can just buy lots of the stuff and then sell it. So
what kind of a license do you need to buy and sell?
An applicator's license.
Well, if you got an applicator's license, can you buy it?
You may very well be able to, yeah. There's some organizations, the city was trying to do that, and they were told that they couldn't. They were trying to just get lots of, a big order, and they were told that they couldn't. RC&D, Resource Conservation Development in the Bitterroot did it 1 year. I'm not sure how that worked out, but they only did it 1 year, so it probably didn't work out so good.
We were told that the DNRC would be able to possibly help fund purchasing the packets for private landowners. Is that not true?
Yeah, no, that's not true. I wish we could. And then there's spraying, which works the best. It's like 90% effective. The pheromone caps are about 70% effective or so. And that varies depending on how big the population is. And all these things are preventative. If you have a tree with beetles in it, it is a goner. You can't do anything to kill the beetles in the tree. You can't save that tree. The pheromone caps aren't going to help. The spray isn't going to help. These would just help trees that haven't yet been hit. So I think the next slide shows the different chemicals. And some last longer than others. Some you don't want to get on your house because it'll make spots, stains on your house. Some you don't want to get in your water. So you would really have to hire a licensed applicator to use this stuff because you need special equipment. Like I say, they've got these pumps that can put out 800 pounds of pressure. They need to spray it up to a 5-inch top. So we're talking reaching way up in there and making a heck of a mess.
So how much does it cost per tree to do that?
It depends on how many trees that you're doing, how big
let's say
they
you
are.
got 10,000 trees, how much is that?
10,000 trees. You can probably get it down to 15 or 20 bucks a tree if you had that many.
I mean, it isn't cost effective.
No, it isn't. No, this is something you would want to do, just some really valuable yard trees. And it can cost like $25 to $50 a tree for just a few trees. And the applicators have told me that they can bring the price down if several neighbors get together and it's worth their while to move in, do a bunch of trees, and a good half-day job or a day job or something. So this is just the guidelines for spraying. You want to really get the whole tree up as high as you possibly can and right down to the ground. And just soak it so that it's running off. And these are the chemicals. Carbaryl has been around the most. I think it's called 7. This is a commercial name. And that supposedly lasts 2 years. I believe the other two like Fentrin and permethrin, just last 1 year, so. And the bottom two might be cheaper, but the fact that it lasts 2 years is a big deal. And, you know, as expensive as this is for a few trees, it might be worthwhile, because if it does last 2 years, and your alternative was to use pheromone caps, you'd need 2 years worth of pheromone caps, and that costs quite a bit as well. And it's not quite as effective. And this just talks about things you need to consider if you're going to have your trees sprayed. You can contact my office if you want. Should I give you my email address? My email address is enorris@mt.gov, G-O-V. It's nice and simple. And if you're going to hire someone, they could mix anything in there. So I would hire a reputable person that you know has been working around the area. And I think there's 3, maybe 4 around. There's not a lot. So.
I think that would be a career that you, occupation you want to make a career out of.
I don't think so.
So if there are only 3 or 4 that are reputable, is that when they're all good? I mean,
They're all reputable?
yeah.
As far as I know, I haven't heard anything bad about it anyway.
So do you have recommendations?
My recommendation would be to call all 3 and just see what they can do for you. Yeah. So if you want to email me, I don't have the phone numbers with me, and I'm not allowed to just pass out people's business.
Do you have their names with you?
Rob Dillon. Able Tree Service.
It's Treasure State, Mike Babbitt, he does it.
Does he? Treasure State? Okay, I wasn't even aware of that one. And Dylan Brown is another one.
So Rob Dillon, Able Tree Service, that's, what's his name, I can't think. Got it burned down Mount Sentinel.
Yeah.
Tom Cook.
And Dylan what?
Dylan Brown.
You got some readings over there.
And if you want to email me, I can send you the phone number as well. That's about all I have. Is there any more questions that people have? Yeah.
So let's say you have 5 or 6 and you'd like to use them for firewood. If you cut them down, cut them into firewood lengths, put plastic on and do the bomb, you think that would do
That
the
might
trick?
just work. And you know what else you could do is just take the tip of your chainsaw, or cut them in 6-foot lengths or something a little way stable, and just take the tip of your chainsaw and just make cuts down that thing lengthwise, and just take as much bark as you can off. You've got to kill most of the bark beetles. Might still be a few in there, but by doing that, you'll certainly mess them up. Nothing else, and it will dry out that much quicker. If you were to do that and then bucket it into relatively short lengths for firewood, it would dry faster. And put them in the sun. You could do the whole gamut. Put it under the plastic and the club bomb. Just really do them again. Don't give it a chance.
I think you can hire Gary to debark them.
Well, you can't. Well, I was just going to say that actually ponderosa will season in one summer. If you peel it early enough in the summer, you can burn it in the fall. It burns really well. But yet, you peel the bark off. And one of my questions was, you see a tree that's just been hit. So you say, okay, I'm going to get there and peel that tree before those beetles get established in the tree. Can you, by doing that, liberate those beetles that are in the tree and they get loose and go get other trees?
I've been told that if you peel the tree and expose the beetles, that they'll die.
Know that, okay. even if it's been recently hit.
There's no beetle liberation.
Well, and then.
And you could burn the bark as well, too.
Oh,
You
yeah.
just start a fire and throw the
Right.
bark in
And
there.
then, I think last year I started feeling too late, but is it getting any earlier than July? Is that applying? July, like the first week of July would be an early or a late flying time? Are they tending to fly earlier now that the weather's getting a little warmer?
If, it depends on the season. If it's a particularly warm spring and it's been summer like all through May, I would be more cautious and do it a week or two early.
Yeah, maybe the middle of June.
Yeah, right, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
So I have like a smaller tree that it's discoloring, and so you're saying to just cut it down and then like burn it immediately?
yeah, that would be the best thing to do. Is it, it's a ponderosa pine?
No, I think it's a lodgepole.
Oh, lodgepole, okay. Yeah. Yes, I would do that. So. Being small is good though, there's fewer beetles in it.
Yeah,
Bigger ones are,
but there's a whole bunch of larger ones in the back that are just totally red already, so.
oh, I see. So they've been there for a while then.
Yeah,
Right.
but that's kind of a communal property.
Oh, I see.
So
Never
I
trust
wanna,
the
I
lodgepole.
wanna write letters to everyone in the neighborhood and say, hey, we should cut those down.
Right. And they like Scotch pine too. That's an ornamental tree that you'll see in town. Boy, it's like candy to them. I just
Yeah.
love those. Yeah.
So are all these dead trees becoming hosts for other kinds of insects then, or?
Well, yeah, it's like wood borers. And that's not a bad thing. That's just part of the decomposition of a tree. It's not promoting more beetles or insects that are going to do more damage. Wood borer, have you ever been out in the woods and seen a stump that looks like there's little bullet holes in it? That's what wood borers do. They go in after the tree's dead, and they kind of help decompose it like ants.
So
and
they will
stuff.
probably increase because of, but that won't move to healthy trees then?
Right, no,
They are
they hit
specific to
dead trees, yeah. So.
We've got 10 acres up Potomac, and it's about, I think 90% or so ponderosa, and they're dying all over the place. And so what we're wondering, we just had a whole bunch removed over the last month, and the green ones over at Mitch Tubes as well, just to get rid of what, so it's done as of this week. What we're trying to figure out is what, do any recommendations on what we could plant that would.
How shady is it?
Well, it was shady because it was pretty heavily wooded, but it's not anymore, and they're dying fast. So
Where are you in Potomac?
Camp Run Road area, Morrison,
Okay.
back there.
If it's sunny, you might get away with larch.
Really?
Larch may well go there. There's probably larch around now, large stumps around. Douglas firs, certainly. The whole world's being taken over by Douglas fir because they do well in the shade. So whatever kind of forest you have, they're going to continue to grow. And certain species won't, like larch and pine. They need to have a fire or logging or open up drastically for them to grow. So.
If you have a south-facing slope, like right over here,
Uh-huh.
is that any safer because it's hotter? Or does it, so it's too hot for the beetle, like you were saying?
It may be even less safe because it's a more stressful environment for them. So the beetles are looking for trees that can't fight back. So.
So if they're not getting water, if
Right.
they're not irrigated or whatever, then they're more susceptible.
Right, yeah. Or if you were at a tree and was irrigated for a long time and suddenly the irrigation's cut off, those are usually the first to go. They're just really going to stress because the roots are all developed around this regime of water that isn't there anymore. So, but watering will help a tree. I mean, there's no guarantee. In fact, it doesn't even hurt to water a tree that's been hit by beetles. It can only help. It certainly can't hurt. If it's just a few hits and the tree's right on the balance there, whether it's going to live or die, water's got to help it. So.
What about the spacing between trees? If you're thinner them out, is there any standard?
That's kind of relative to the size of the trees. So you know, if we're talking trees like this, you'd want a good 15 to 20 feet between trees. Actually, you want to get space between the tips of the branches. If it's thin enough so that they're just not quite touching, that's not good enough. You want some open space, like 5 or 6 or 10 feet.
That's what I'm figuring.
Because they're going to grow, well, any tree, if you're going by the branches, because as a tree grows up, it grows out as well. And pretty soon they'll be touching anyway. So opening those crowns up and giving them so sun can get to the sides of the branches as well as the top of the tree. That's what it needs, because it wants to keep those. If they start crowding each other, they start getting shady, then those lower branches just die back and die back and die back. Pretty soon you get this tall, skinny whip with just a little green top. So if you can catch the tree before it loses all those branches and open it up and let the sun get around it, that tree will just have a lot better form. It'll just be a great tree in the future. Yeah.
Is there any fail-safe way to, you know, the normal ponderosa pine needles will drop after 5 to 7 years. Is there any fail-safe way to determine between the two so you don't end up cutting down a tree that's only shedding its natural mortality?
Yeah, actually, like you say, a tree's growing needles every year. It'll grow needles, and then the branch will grow more needles, and the branch will grow more needles as it gets longer and longer. The needles towards the back of the branch, towards the trunk, those will just naturally, usually in the fall, turn red and they blow all over the place, make a heck of a mess. If you have branches, needles, towards the outside of the branch, the newer needles, and that's turning red, that's bad. It shouldn't be doing that.
Is it the natural red needles, they usually fall off before the others would have a chance to get red, so there's no overlap there?
Yeah, and what you'll see is the parts of the tree, if a tree's got beetles or something that's dying from beetles, seems like the parts of the tree that's growing the most vigorously, the top and some of the branches that are getting lots of sunlight, those are the ones that dry out first. And if you're seeing that, that's a bad sign. If you're seeing other needles that are turning red at the bottom of the tree or inside the tree, and the needles on the top and on the outsides of the branches look good, that's a good sign.
Eric, over here at the dam site, those pines have been there forever, and now that the water table has dropped down, I suspect that grove out there is probably stressed. Is that what you would?
If it was truly getting its water from there, there could be some subterranean water coming from the mountain down or something like that, which it may have tapped into. It's hard to tell. But if they were tapped into the river, then the trees are just going to get stressed on the outside, and the beetles will probably get them in the end.
And they're very old trees, as I recall. So they're in a condition that something could happen to them.
Yes, right. And if a tree starts dying back because its roots are suffering somehow, they've been cut or gouged or compacted or the water taken away, the tree will start to slowly look thinner and weaker and thinner, and it won't be full anymore. And it could take years and years for it to happen, but yeah.
I think early on you said that in 1926 there was a big beetle outbreak in the Bitter Road or somewhere. What ends that kind of thing?
I think just the either cold that lasts for a long enough time to actually have an impact on the population, or they just eat their self out of house and home, and the host gets all killed. There was also a beetle epidemic of the spruce beetle up around top of Lolo Creek and over into the Locksaw in there, and they logged all that away years and years ago too. They just clear cut it all in those days. It's hard to tell now. It just came back gangbusters and spruce and other things. So.
But there is a beetle that goes into the spruce trees.
Yes, there is. Yeah, it's real similar, and I think it's the same genus or Dendrochromis or something like that. And they look similar, but they do have the same sort of lifestyle. life cycle. I don't know if the life cycle matches perfectly by month, but same sort of thing. Parents go in, larvae do the damage, they pupa, form a beetle, and go on. So, yeah.
Seems to me in the 70s in the Selway, there was a lot of concern about pine beetle infestation.
Oh, that could be. Yeah, I'm surprised it's not hit now. It's like some endless lodgepole up in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're saying one pitch pocket on a tree could produce 60 more beetles? approximately?
It could if it was totally successful, that's right, yeah.
So wouldn't you want to, even if it had one little thing on it, get it back out there?
Yeah, yes, I mean, if it's not a tree that was really precious to you, I'd give it the benefit of the doubt that it's going to die, take it out. But if it's something that you just really want to live, and you're just a wishful thinker, you might just leave it. I've done that myself. There's a tree, whatever happens, happens. I don't want to cut this tree. And it lived, and it's still there to this day, so.
A while ago, you said that larch trees need more sunshine.
Yes.
And my experience is that where I found larch mostly is on north slopes. Is that not correct?
Yeah, that's true, yeah. But they'll get started, you'll see strips of them in some places on north slopes. And it's usually some old burn pattern where a fire went up many, many years ago. And that's where they get started. And also I've seen forests turn into a large forest. You'll have a mixed forest of different species. And I saw this at Glacier Park, and it must have had, I don't know, 4 or 5 different species there, and larch was one of them. Fire came through and killed everything but the larch, because the larch is by far the most fire-resistant tree. So historically, there was a lot more larch around the country, just for that reason alone. It just happened to survive fire after fire. Even when they're young, up West Fork of Gold Creek, there's areas that are now, well, there always was a lot of larch there, but it's just amazing how the larches had gone through the young stands of the fire, had gone through the young stands of larch, and they survived anyway. Because they have those woody buds, which also protects them. But yeah, if you were to plant a larch in a shady spot, it may not die right away. It may not die for 30 years, but it just won't grow very much. It just kind of sits there. You might have seen ponderosa pine, that really skinny and wispy looking, and they just don't have that leader. That's because the sun's coming from all over the place, and they don't have something to really shoot for. If you took everything out from around there, you'd probably start going straight up and get some dirt to it.
I'll make a comment on that. I know the fir and larch grow together on the north slope. And I was assuming that meant that the larch doesn't like the direct sun any more than the fir does.
Well, they like, oh, go ahead.
Maybe they protect each other. I don't really know that much about it.
Yeah, well, they like cool places. Fir likes shady places.
Yeah.
But the larch likes cool spots and moist spots and cold air pockets. Cold air can kill certain things. You'll see lodgepole growing in places where other things don't thrive very well, but the lodgepole does, because it does well. Cold. And some of these draws that you'll see in a north-facing slope, it's kind of a gutter of cold air going down the thing. It seems to like that sort of thing.
Could I ask you another question?
Sure.
On the blue pine, the blue Spain.
Yes.
Does that contribute to rot in the wood?
I think it does. Not a lot, because
the reason I'm asking, now this goes years ago when I was working in the mills. The mill I worked at was buying what we call it farmer timber. They'd be clearing out an area and they'd bring in all the logs that they cut. And then we'd put them through the mill and, either load them up for air drying and they also had kilns that they kiln dry some of them. But they had one, brought in a lot of blue stain pine, and one of the builders got wind of it and asked us to set it aside for him if we could. And he wanted to use all of the blue stain in like some paneling.
Right, yes, and some people like that.
Well, yeah, this one family, well, they called it their entertainment room or family room, you know, but they had the blue stain pine up, like 4 feet, and then from there on up, they had all different wallpaper and stuff like
Right,
that.
okay, like a wainscot.
But they called it the blue room.
Oh, is that right?
And once in a while, they'd have it where the paneling would go all the way to the ceiling, but then they'd have a big mirror or something there, and anything to make it look a little different. But I just got a quick glimpse of it. They took me out to see it once. And it did look real good, but when I heard about it having an effect on the quality of the wood, I was wondering if it would hold up as paneling.
Well, I think it does, and I suspect that, I know the mills pay half price for the logs that go in, if they're blue stain. And they probably sell it as a specialty item, I guess that's American way.
I've worked for a lumber yard for 16 years. The blue stain pine was a big deal for people. And it cost more because they wanted to use it for paneling or put it in their game room or whatever, you know.
Right.
Does it affect the strength of it, or is it?
I don't think it does, because Sun Mountain is a mill in Deer Lodge, and they make 2x4s, 2x6s, and they buy lots of blue stain lodgepole, fortunately, because there's so much around there.
Is that because of the pine beetle kill?
Yes, and they don't pay any less for it, they don't seem to think it matters at all.
Second grade or anything like that?
Yeah, it's just a, cosmetic thing, really.
Now, the ones I was talking about, they had good sized boards that came out of them. And now they were ponderosa pine. And the same effect, I guess, still the same stain that you have in the lodge.
Yes, it's all the same, that's right. It might manifest itself a little differently between species, but it's the same thing. So, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if you had, I thinned some of my trees out that had quite a few hits on them, but I had some trees that just had a few hits, and I was just wondering if that peeling might work to salvage a tree. Like if you had a pitch block at a small place, if you could just go take that off of the tree and then paint it over or something to protect the tree, if you have any success to it.
You could do that. You'd have a risk of damaging the tree just as much as a beetle would, but you could do that. And if I would cut a little bit in there and just see if you're seeing a gallery. If you're not finding any gallery, then it's pitched out. Yeah. And sometimes you can actually see the beetle encased in the pitch, which is a good sign. There's the culprit right there. Yeah.
With apple trees, they've got these little sticky trap things, so if the apple maggots or whatever the other one is, apple borer are flying, you can catch them and detect it and then put on whatever spray treatment or anything. I was wondering if you had a perfectly healthy pines, is there any similar thing that could be used to detect bark beetles flying in even before the, from what you said, it sounded like the pitch tubes, and that is about the first indication you get. Is there any sticky trap or anything that would work so you could detect even before they got that far?
I think they do that. And I would suspect that the more you find, the more they know the population.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it for pine, that's why I was asking.
Right, but I think they do that in just kind of detection. So.
I know that we pretty much run out of time, but one of the striking things that you showed was the map of the infestations.
Yes.
In Montana, and I wondering if maybe in a later series, perhaps, that someone, perhaps you, could talk about the effect of all of this on other species, like bears and other animals.
Oh, I see.
Because it looks pretty serious, and, you know, what feeds off of those pine cones, for example, and how does it affect
Right.
the ecosystem?
Yeah, well, squirrels, of course. Bears are being affected supposedly because of the white bark pine. There's certain places and certain times of the year that's an important food source for them. And these white bark pine, which is really sad because they live forever. They get to be really ancient and the most gnarliest looking things you've ever seen. And it's like nothing has killed them in the past, and they're just dying acres, thousands of acres of it, so.
So I'm not sure whether I should be concerned about this, because it's like, you really can't do anything much about it unless there's a significant change in the climate. You get really, really cold winters now.
Right.
Which doesn't look like it's going to happen anymore. I mean, you know, it's a cyclical thing, but at the same time, it's unusual.
Yeah, the cycles are like this, and this happens to be like this time. So. In Colorado and British Columbia, they're farther along than we are, and it's major devastation there. I think the populations are going down because it's just the host isn't there anymore. And now I was just reading in Colorado, there's something that's affecting the aspen as well. It's being real disastrous. The whole state's going to be denuded here. Yeah, that's one thing you can do in the long run. Although there's other things that hit other trees. So.
What's the longest? I heard if you got 3 or 4 trees next to each other, and you can cut one down, the other 3 kind of stress out the one that got cut, or they can sense that it got cut or something. What?
If you have 3 trees and you've got one that's kind of a runt of the 3, if you were to cut the 2 big ones and leave the runt, suddenly it's getting too much sun. It has this root system that kind of matches the crown of the tree. And so if all of a sudden that crown is getting lots of direct sunlight, it just doesn't have the root system to suck up and feed it, and it goes into shock, either sits there and looks the same forever, or worse, or dies. So that's why you want to leave a tree that's got a really good crown, because the roots kind of reflect what the crown is. So the crown reflects what the root is. So you want to avoid, you know, if you've got really good trees with really good form, think about getting the premier trees out and away from that. Okay, well, thank you very much.